My name's Bill Nemeth from JumpStart. I run the Burton D mentoring program. I'll give you a little bit more background on me in a while. But we're doing this because we're in a precarious, unique, unprecedented situation. That's our closest analog is what happened in 2008, the financial crisis. We've brought together a group of panelists that lived through that time period, that ran companies, that were in customer facing in the financial industry, serial entrepreneurs that made it out the other side, that lived through it. Since it's the closest analog that we have to what's going on right now, we wanted to bring them together to share with you their experiences. I am one of them. I ran and founded a company. We went from 2 to 350 employees and lived through the 2000 .com meltdown and then the 2008. And the panelists and I all have scars, and we want to help you avoid that. This isn't the world's most pleasant webinar you will ever attend, but we feel it's necessary, and it's the opening round of continuing to help you and get more specific in what we're doing. So with that, I want to give you just a little bit of housekeeping and the who's behind this. JumpStart, I think you know, we're an economic development organization, a venture development organization that works with diverse and ambitious entrepreneurs throughout Northeast Ohio. The Burton D. Morgan Foundation funded our mentoring program. Our mentoring program has over 140 active mentors. We've helped over 200 companies, and those companies have gone on to raise and generate revenue over $350 million to date. So we're here for you. The areas of coverage that we're gonna try to hit during this are immediate issues, things that you got to look at right now: cash flow, sales and customers, employees, capital, your mental health, scenario planning, and then vendors. With that, I will turn it over to our panelists. You'll hear me asking questions, occasionally interject. I'm going to have them introduce each of themselves one by one in no particular order, and give a real brief background of themselves and hit their one critical thing that they see as paramount in you succeeding and making it through this, coming out the other side. So with that, I'm going to start with Kathy Lippert. Kathy?
Hi, Kathy Lippert. I've been in this software business since 1980. So this is my fourth storm, if you will. I'm going to go really fast about each one of those, where we were, what was going on. And, you know, I'm pretty much living testament that you can survive this. So in October 1987, there was Black Monday. At that time, I was with a growth company, about 200 people. We survived it, but we didn't survive it permanently. We had a bad exit, and the team was dispersed, and there was an asset acquisition at that time. So I landed fine. I joined a large company, but the company no longer existed, although the assets of the company did. The second time, in 2001, 2002, I was with a large company, a different large company. There was a huge reduction in force, and I ended up joining a company here in Cleveland, Flashline. It was one of Charlie Stack's companies, who had just gotten funded. So what's interesting about that is there was funding going on, and there were companies trying to build value at that time. In 2008, I was still in the Flashline trajectory. This time it was in the second acquisition in 22 months. We went to BEA and then Oracle. And Oracle, you know, right in the middle of the 2008 downturn, BEA and Oracle were buying companies. So there were people with resources that valued what we had built. And today, I'm probably more like you. I'm I'm a co-founder of a young startup. We are in an incubator. We are trying to get our traction, and we're facing many of the things you are, but we're kind of sheltered in place. We're keeping our runway as long as we can. And my message to you is that although this may be a rocky time, as a founder, I think your key job is to extend your runway, not just for the sake of extending it, but do the things you did at first to find real value. You may have to depend heavily on the agile and lean methodologies to do another round of customer discovery and engage with them, because the demand the demand for your products and services is shifting. Obviously, everybody knows that. But do what you did at first to identify concrete opportunities.
Kathy,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to interrupt.
yeah,
So
you bet.
thank you. It's just we're under a time limit, so I'm gonna be rude to everyone. So speaking of being rude to people, Gene, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Gene Groyce. I have been in the entrepreneurial community here for many years. I've started 3 companies, the first one being OnShift, and currently I am in the middle of a early stage startup in the healthcare space. All 3 of my companies were in the healthcare space. 2008 was tough, but I just want to say that what we're going through right now is unlike any other period, any other crisis that I believe that we've had in the past, and that means we have to approach this very differently. We're really facing an exogenous threat that we've never faced before. And one of the things to consider, I'll just quickly tell you the difference between 2008 and 2008. Investors were getting scarce, but it didn't mean they weren't investing. And customers that you were selling to were still buying, especially in the healthcare space. So that wasn't a challenge. And so your ability to extend your MRR, continue to gain revenue, and continue to focus on growth was an option. Where we are today, we're looking at something that is completely different. Any financials that you had, any projections that you had, now I'm going to go right into the advice. Any projections that you had are no longer valid. So if you're sitting around still trying to figure out how you can make your current projections work, I would suggest starting to think about that a little bit differently, because I believe right now the focus really needs to shift on revenue conservation in dollars. Right now it's going to be about how do we limit our cost, extend our runway to be able to survive this. If you're wondering how long this is going to last, I don't think anybody has a really good number right now, but I believe that in order to survive, you're going to need to figure out one way or another how to extend your runway through the next 12 to 18 months in any way possible, everything from shuttering your doors to cutting costs, cutting headcount, and really looking at this problem in a totally different way. And do it now. Don't sit and wait. Don't wait to see what happens. I believe it's going to get worse before it gets better. So that's kind of I'll start with that.
Thanks, Gene. Sam?
Good morning, I'm Sam Gerace. I've had the good fortune to start, grow, and sell or take public 4 companies, all software, over the last 35 years. Like Kathy, I've been through 4 crises, and as Gene said, this one's a little different. If we look at a crisis along 2 axes, the frequency of uncertainties and the materiality of the consequences, this one sits outside of the others. We can't predict the frequency with which changes are happening, nor the materiality that a given one of those changes, like a shelter-in-place order, will have. And crisis leadership is different than normal leadership. So you have permission to make hard decisions is my big thing. And when you're thinking about making those hard decisions, I would encourage 2 things. One, assemble a crisis team. It can be hard for small entrepreneurs because you may not have this team internal to your organization, but this is another case to reach out to friends and family and create a team of people who can help you think through it. And then you can go through the OODA loop, OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. This was invented by Korean fighter pilot John Boyd after they tried to figure out why he was better than everybody else at responding to tactical situations that were outside of his control. And if you go through this loop, observe, orient, decide, act, faster than the changes in the market, you're driving your response. If the market is changing faster than you do this, it is driving you. So I would encourage you to assemble a small team and go through this OODA loop at least weekly, and you will end up driving your response rather than being driven.
Thanks, Sam. Jenny?
Hi, I'm Jenny Zamberlin. I've lived my entire career in Northeast Ohio in the software industry. The company I have right now, I started in 2000, about 20 minutes before the economy fell off the edge of a cliff for the first of 3 times in the next few years. So it's been 20 years in this company, and living through the 2008 crisis had a huge impact on me personally. And I think what feels different to me today compared to 2008, in 2008, I felt totally alone. I didn't really have the network of people around me. We didn't have the kind of social media and the connectivity like this webinar right now. And I felt like what was happening to me, I was all alone. But it was only later when I started talking to other people and seeing that the banks actually froze up and called credit lines. And I had to make very tough decisions. But we survived that. We got through it. And again, I think the advice that you've already heard from this group is you've got to make the tough decisions as soon as possible. And while you're doing that, I think as a leader, it's imperative to communicate authentically and transparently. Try to be as encouraging as possible, but you don't want to give people false hopes. And the quicker you can make the tough decisions and communicate those out, the better you're going to be. Your fundamental responsibility is ensuring the survival of your organization. And sometimes you can't save everybody. So those are the hard things you need to look at. All that said, what we're seeing, because this is so global, and the response that we're thinking is going to come from the federal government and the state, I think there's going to be options today. Our banking system is sound, and I think the government's going to help small companies and employers keep people employed. So I'm optimistic from that perspective. We'll see how that all works logistically. But every crisis is different. I think that the value of having lived through a crisis is you've got some, you know that you're going to come out on the other side of it. And if I would say one thing, it's the sun's going to come up. The sun always comes up. So it's going to look different on the other side of it, but there's also huge opportunities that are often created in these crises. So be strong, do what you have to do, and we'll all survive this together.
I want to make a quick editorial comment here. Thank you, Jenny, first. Just so you attendees don't think you're out there sitting alone, first off, we've got questions coming in, but there are pushing 350 of you out there right now. Please go ahead and bombard us. We're ready for it. And because there's a couple good questions out there already that I'll hit, and one I may just answer. And there's a couple things that developed around the small businesses, the loans that are coming out in the package that the House better pass, that we'll address as well. So with that, Mr. Molnar.
Hey everybody, Mark Molnar. I spent the first 15, 17 years or so in the equity capital markets. So I was on the investment side of things, kind of Wall Street positions, managing portfolios and equity sales in the Midwest. I didn't really get into the entrepreneurial side of things until about 2007 when I made an investment in a company that I ultimately came to run in the education management space. Since then, I've been CFO of a company called Corporate United, and now, like many of the others on the panel, I'm part of a couple different startups here in Cleveland as well. In 2008, again, I was kind of straddling Wall Street and starting up another company. So I felt the effects of the downturn, firsthand at a very personal level, both running an equity sales team where people were wondering whether their jobs were going to continue to be in focus, or that they're going to be parts of other companies, or whether the whole business is going to be around. So certainly a trying time that I was involved in there. 2000, 2001 timeframe. Again, I was part of Wall Street, and on a personal level, our headquarters were down at Seaport Plaza, a couple blocks away from the World Trade Center. So I knew plenty of folks that at a personal level that were involved in the tragedy, at ground level. And then back in 1987, I was a junior in high school, so I wasn't as tied into the business as some of the other folks, but I was worried about going to college and worried about whether or not some of the money that my parents had saved to help me get through college was still going to be there. So certainly got to have some scars. A couple things that I would say as advice to think about is, first of all, today is supposed to be opening day for the tribe, right? I got my tribe hat on. I'm ready to go. Things have changed. So everyone's life, everyone that you're dealing with on a very personal level, your vendors, your employees, your banks, your investors, things have changed for them as well. It's not just you in a vacuum as an entrepreneur. So I would just say when you're working with people, when you're talking to people, understand that their lives have also been impacted. And so try and treat people kindly. You've got to make hard decisions. People understand that. But also understand that the decisions that they're making aren't decisions that they may want to be making either. They may be forced into making decisions that may not benefit you. But you've got to understand that everyone's making these decisions. So treat people well and treat people fairly, and try and work with your customers, your employees, and your vendors. The second thing I would say is opportunities are going to be created. It may not be the same opportunity that you thought it was when you created your company and when you put your business plans together. But there's all kinds of opportunities that are going to be created as a result of this. It may not be today, but you may have to pivot your business, and there may be, you've got distillery companies out there that very quickly shifted their production to making hand sanitizer. I don't know what your specific businesses are, but there may be a need for what you could do, but you're not currently doing, and you should think about that. Again, there's $2 trillion that are going to be coming out of the federal government. A lot of that's going to go direct to individuals, but there will be business opportunities that will be created around that as well. So keep your head up and move forward. That's it.
And last but not least, Mr. Knutson, and there's already questions out here, so you may be put on the line first. So with that, John.
No worries. So you're leaving the crusty old sales guy to go last, huh? My name is John, obviously. I've been a mentor for JumpStart for going on about 2 years. It's a sort of my volunteer job. My day job is I work for IBM. I've been there pretty much forever, so I've lived through all of these crises in one way or another. The last 4 years, I come on these panels because I'm the guy that buys the companies. At least I don't personally, but we do. So I've been running a global sales team based around an acquisition we made in 2015, and trying to bring that technology under the portfolio of our broader sales portfolio. And so I focus a lot on sales strategy, sales enablement, sales training, and just basic sales management. So Bill asked us to talk about one crucial thing. And my one crucial thing is time kills all deals. And let me sort of start by telling you a story, a little bit of dose of reality and a little bit of optimism, hopefully. Ironically, it was about 9:30 p.m. on March 25th, 2009. My wife and I are sitting around the kitchen table and my BlackBerry goes off. Yes, we used BlackBerries in 2009. I got this nebulous calendar invite that came from my boss for a 2:30 p.m. meeting the next day for 10 minutes, had no subject. It was eerily odd. It came in late at night, It was only 10 minutes long and it had no subject. March 26, IBM lays off 2,000 people in the United States. That 10-minute conversation went something like this. Sorry to tell you, but our department of 400 people has been eliminated. Your job classification has been eliminated. You have 30 days to find a new job within IBM or take an exit package. I've got 2 kids in college. The stock market has tanked. The housing crisis is a disaster, and the financial banks are in turmoil. I got 30 days to figure out what to do. The one crucial thing I learned in 2009 was time kills all deals. So my big advice to you folks on the sales side is don't stop building your pipeline. It's critical. What I learned was deals that were solid are no longer solid. People with signing authority no longer had signing authority. People needed our services. They had agreed to it. Sometimes they'd even contracted it. The competition became the status quo. In other words, people just did nothing. So now's the time to continue to build your pipeline. Focus on the top of the funnel. You want to double, triple check the deals that you think you have. You want to get through the next few months. And literally, if you have a sales team, I would suggest you need to talk every day to your client, every day to your prospect. Like I said, and once we get through this, if you have a strong pipeline at the top of the funnel, the good news will come out at the bottom of the funnel, sales funnel. The bit of optimism, I guess sales guys always got to be a bit optimistic. I'll tell you the good news out of all this was, yeah, I starved in 2009, didn't make my numbers, but I focused, and I closed the largest deal of my life in the first quarter of 2010. It was 250% of my number, and I got promoted to an executive sales management position. So you're going to make, as everyone said, you're going to make some tough decisions. You may not be comfortable with selling. You may have a sales team, but they're going to have a lot of excuses. But I'm going to tell you that people won't want to buy now, but they will. So continue to build your pipeline because time kills all deals.
I'm going to launch into the questioning. The questions are coming in on another screen, so bear with me temporarily. But the first one I want to hit with is I want to start with Jenny. And Gene kind of covered it already. What's different this time between what happened in the other crises you've lived through and what you're seeing now?
From my perspective, in 2008, for me, that actually started in 2007 when the market was going down a little bit every month. And to me, it was a longer downslope. And then it took an extraordinarily long amount of time to come out of that. But we saw like a total, at some point, the demand had just dried up for doing new work. So this time, to me, this seemed like it was very quick. I mean, we saw what was happening in China in January and February, weren't paying all that much attention, but this, everybody quarantined right now. I mean, that was just a very immediate impact. I love what Sam said with the UDA, you've got to every single day look at what's changed today. And I think this is just going so much more quickly than it did in 2008. The other contrast, though, I think since our entire economy and government went through that in 2008, they're mobilized much differently for this crisis versus what I think we saw back then.
Thank you, Jenny. And just another editorial comment. There is a resource list on our website that'll hit some of the loan questions you have. There's an Urban League seminar that's happening this morning around SBA. We'll cover some of that, but I want to let you know that there are resources available and more things you're going to see. That being said, there's a lot of questions we're going to answer directly around around cash flow, around loans, around some of the other things, and how you decide what you should do. So first question, I'm going to hit Mark since he came from the financial world. How critical of an issue is cash flow?
I mean, cash is king, right? I mean, especially to a startup, that is what makes or breaks your business, right? You have to maintain cash. Anything you can do to protect your cash flow is at the top of your list as far as running your business. You can't run your business without cash. So, I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. If you're looking at any metrics, you got to look at your bank account and see what you've got in there to run your business. If you got to cut some costs, you've got to cut some costs. If you're at a point where you can, delay payments in any way, you've got to be able to try and do that. If there's a way to, that you can personally live without taking a salary, then you got to do that. If there's ways to, incentivize your employees with giving them stock or some other option, and they can live on less cash, that's what you got to do. So yeah, I don't know any other way to put it. Your cash is number one. Cash is king.
Okay, we're going to get into
Anyone
some
else?
strategies. And anyone especially on the, how do you keep it coming in from your customers? Especially if you aren't right now, they're worried about their business. They've got priorities with their employees and their vendors aren't necessarily their number one priority. So how do you get close to your customer to make sure you get paid? Who wants to take that?
Let me jump in over here. I have actually been going through exactly this problem, and I'm sure some of you other guys have lots of comments on this. So that's exactly what I'll just say. That's exactly what we're doing. We're focused on revenue. Any plans that we had on growth and pumping money into growth have been, for all practical purposes, completely shut off. We are now completely focused on our customers. There's a couple of things you have to do from a planning perspective. You need to cut your MRR projections by 30 to 50%. I think that's one part that you need to include as in terms of your planning when you're projecting how much cash you're going to have on hand and how long you really have to survive. That's number one. Number two, you need to get a hold of all of your customers. You need to, number one, ask them if there's anything you can help them with. You need to empathize with them. You need to be on their side. You need to be a partner instead of a vendor. Right now is probably the most critical time about that. And then you need to ask them direct questions. You need to understand that, look, we have bills to pay just like you do. We will bend over to help you, and we really want to understand, what is your timing on paying these? What is your timing on paying these bills? Or I've got bills. I will send them to you. And based on what they say, you're going to have to adjust your billing cycles accordingly. They may have plans for their organization to cut how they're going to be paying their vendors. And you just need to develop a plan with each of your customers for how they're going to pay you. But at the same time, prepare for the worst, which is that you're only going to get a fraction of your payments. Third piece I'll add, also understand your industry. Because that is really going to drive how well, what is your customer's ability to pay? Because if they're in an industry with all of their businesses dried up, if they're in the hospitality business, if they're, something having to do with restaurants where they are completely going to be strapped, I think it's a pretty safe bet that that's going to be a reflection on your cash flow as their ability to pay you.
Yeah, I agree. Gene's spot on. I mean, the more you can talk to your client, the more you can be open with them. Things change day to day, so don't assume what you had, the discussion you had 2 weeks ago is still valid. I think, Gene, that's great advice.
Yeah, it's really unprecedented. You almost have to look at your customer base and resegment them, because same demand, the same need, the same value you're delivering doesn't necessarily hold water. We're trying to do traction right now, and actually in the last week or two, we have gotten so close to the handful of customers we're trying to pilot that we are actually in better shape in a couple of ways by doing that, because it's not just like we're looking at the whole portfolio of business, we're actually digging in. So I think this has to, cash is absolutely something you have to manage day by day, week by week. But if you're in attraction mode, if you are a startup, and some of you are, this is actually an unprecedented way for you to revalidate what value you're actually bringing, and get a very sharp point on that.
Sam?
And just on the cash management, realize that customers have discretion. There are human processes going on in terms of how they disperse money. And if you take the person who has the best relationship with each customer and you call them and you literally give them permission to pay some customers, if they can't pay all, will not pay any unless you give them permission. So you have to get in front of them and say, look, these are difficult times. We understand you might not be able to pay the whole bill. Can you pay?
Ooh, we froze.
Sam, you froze.
That's a
Can
great
you pay
face,
any
though.
part of it? I like that.
Yep,
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm going to interject on something here. Remember, all of you entrepreneurs, you're on the other side of this fence too. You are somebody's customer.
Yeah.
Those same negotiations can go both ways, because we've had questions already about, I have a 90-day contract with somebody. What do I do? A marketing firm. Back to talking to everybody. Communications through this is going to be key. We'll hit that question specifically, but I wanted to point that out. I'm going to also make one more comment here. The latest I heard on the bill that's going in front of the House today, I believe, and may be voted on today or tomorrow, the loan program that is going to come out is going to entail forgiveness for the entire loan. This is not the SBA emergency loans. This is something totally different. And I'm saying this so our panel's up to date and all you're up to date, because some of our questions are going to be directed at, do we do this? Do we not do this? What's the impact? The forgiveness is predicated on this. If you fired people already, you got to bring them back. You can't fire anybody for the duration of, there's a time period on this, and I believe it's 8 to 12 months. So if you're going to take a loan, you need to be able to get profitable enough to keep those people employed after the loan funds run out. Even though it is being forgiven and you do not have to pay it back, you still have to pay these people after the loan runs out. All you're doing, if you bring them back and cannot see that from a sales and the market coming back, is you're going to buy a slower death or a slower path to unemployment for your folks. So we're going to address that. Keep in mind, on the face of it though, I would say start applying immediately. It's a limited pot. It's a very, very large pot. It's either $250 billion or $500 billion, but you're going to need to be able to be profitable enough to pay your employees without loan support after that cash runs out. And each loan is up to $2 million. Key is up to. Okay, now that being said, we're still on cash. Credit lines. A lot of business have credit lines from their banks. Some small, some large. Sam, what do you do with them?
Draw down all available credit now, period.
Yeah.
In fact, get off the call right now and draw down your available credit.
The longer
Literally.
this, the longer this goes, the less money will be available.
Because
go ahead.
Get back to
banks
the
can't
cash
make,
point.
yeah, I don't care what your contract says with the bank, they can make it difficult for you to pull the cash out. If the cash is in your account, they can stomp their feet all they want. They can threaten penalties all they want. You'll survive and then renegotiate. And that is the key. Just before in 2002, we had just negotiated a $5 million line of credit that we didn't expect to tap. It was just in case we decided to do a particular expansion. The market crash hit. We pulled $5 million into our account, bang. And it was going to say, we thought it might just sit there and we might just pay the interest on it. We didn't know. The bank called, the officer who set up the loan called, like, what are you guys doing? And I smiled at him. I said, I have the cash. That's what I'm doing. And he, very quickly, they made it tough for people, but you had to get on top of it before, as a process, they made it tough. So draw down your available credit.
Yeah. And that goes for any investment extent, credit and funds that may be there for you to draw down. Actually, on the West Coast, in the accelerators, we're hearing even the VCs want us, to pull down money.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
money that's available that you haven't drawn.
Hey, Mark, from a CFO perspective and having been in the financial industry, what normally happens even with the quote unquote performing lines of credit and loans with the small businesses at this point?
I'll be honest, Bill. I have not been involved in small business loans, so I don't want to comment on that. I just don't know.
From my perspective, they push most of them into workout, which means they're going to call them, meaning pay it back. Go find a new lender. But like Sam said, if you've got the money, they can't just come confiscate it. They're going to have to work with you to make sure they get paid back, because they need to be paid back at some point. So realize the why with what Sam is saying. With loans, we've had questions on, let me see if I can find the one.
Hey, Bill, let me interject on the credit lines. For a lot of small businesses, those are secured with your personal assets. So just make sure that you understand the terms of your loan. And there's often a provision that says the bank can call the loan without any justification. So you really need to understand the terms of your loan. And if your personal assets are securing that line of credit, I mean, I don't disagree with Sam that maybe you should draw the money down, but spend it very carefully, because you do need to pay that back. And if your house note is securing that loan, that's a huge impact. So, big companies, it may be a different story, but little guys, small business owners, everything you own is securing. Nobody gives you money, and no bank is going to establish a new relationship in difficult times. So
what's the answer? Do you put up your house as collateral? Do you put your personal well-being up to support the business? And how do you make that real decision?
I think that depends on how much you believe in the business and your ability to survive an unknowable future.
It's a new business bet. You still have to get a return on that investment, a return on that capital. So it sounds like the government is taking steps to try to help people, get through in the short term, but their emphasis appears to be, Bill, by what you're saying, that they want to be a viable company still standing better, stronger than ever. So whatever you do with that money, it has to be put into building value in your company. It may not be, the sales pipeline, but what is it that you're building of value? And that drives you straight back to lean principles, agile principles. What is the durable value you are going to build with that money? Because money isn't free, right? And there are risks, personal guarantees and all. So just be aware that you're not using the money just to get through this period of time. Oh, my payroll is paid or whatever. No, still make the hard decisions to make sure that you are working on the kernel of your business that's going to sustain value in the market in a few months.
Let me also
quick question for you, G.
Okay.
Do you bet your family's well-being on pledging your own personal capital, running up credit cards, second mortgages, etc.? Is your business you?
So here's what you need to think about. Right now, because this is unprecedented, you have to look at this different than you did in the dot-com boom or the previous days. Your This is where market validation comes in. So let's say you understood your market, you identified the ROI, and you knew how to sell to them. Let's say you figured all of that out. And by the way, I am that crazy entrepreneur who bet everything in the first company, ran up credit card debt, kind of put my family's well-being on the line in the first company, and luckily I was able to survive that. This is completely different. Right now, what we're looking at is whatever ROI you believed you had, whatever processes you believe you put in place to sell to your customers, whatever you believed that you would able to accomplish through the company, that is no longer the case. We are in a completely different paradigm. I know somebody said that in the beginning. And this is what you have to consider in the new paradigm of how you are building your business, in the value that you're bringing to your customers. And will your customers buy the product? Have you reached that level of certainty? Have you done the market analysis that you can safely make that bet? If you have, then I would absolutely proceed. But I would argue the fact that right now there has not been enough time for anybody to really figure that out. My customers aren't sure if we're selling to nursing homes. They're not sure if they're going to be flooded with customers, with patients, or if the patients are going to be bypassing them and they're all going to be home. There's a whole lot of uncertainty. So in that type of an environment, I'm going to be much more cautious than I would have been in any other time period before. So there's a lot more to discuss on that topic, but at a high level, that's my position on it right now.
Okay, and we're gonna transition to the last cash flow question, and this is going to incorporate a bunch of different questions that I've got here on my other screen, and I'm gonna give it to Sam first because he brought this up with me. Renegotiations. We've got them about vendors, about customers, about rent, long-term rent. We've got terms questions on contracts and on payment. So what's open for renegotiation, and how do you start that, Sam?
I mean, I have the good fortune that my dad, now retired, was an attorney. And one thing to realize is a contract is a snapshot of continuous negotiation. No contract has ever been adhered to the letter. You just can't do it. Conditions change realistically. In America, we place way too much weight on the contract. You need to get your head in the space of this is a continuous negotiation. And so every contract is available to negotiate. One of the keys to do it, whether it's rent, whether it's suppliers, whatever it is. But a key to successful renegotiation is making specific proposals that the other party can react to. You don't call and cry poor mouth. You say, I propose to pay you 50% each month and to delay the 50% that I'm not paying you for 12 months. You give them something very specific, and they will begin to react not to the horror of you not paying, but to how we can work something out that legitimately lets them survive and you survive. Another thing that's really helpful to do is learn their lingo. When you call a bank and want to renegotiate, the word moratorium is really important. That's their word for not paying for a while. So you say, I'd like to negotiate a moratorium on my payments. If you learn the lingo of the other party, and it depends, real estate landlords have one terminology, banks have another. Again, all of a sudden they're in a negotiating mode. They're not in a react to you saying I'm not paying mode. But I will say everything is open to renegotiation. Just go in with that mindset, and it is not something that shows that you are weak. It is simply a renegotiation.
Yeah, and in editorial comment, we have multiple people with storefront real estate. Some are sole proprietors, et cetera. It is not in your landlord's best interest for you to go dark or to walk out in default. They would rather, because they know everybody is in this boat right now. This isn't just you needing to go away or default or whatever it's going to be, or renegotiate. Everybody's going to be doing this. They're going to be doing it with their lenders. So if you can come to them and give a proposal like Sam did and say, look, I can't pay you now, but this is what I propose in the future, they're more likely to work with you. And no matter what your lease says, because they don't want to throw you out because they're not going to have anybody to put back in there.
Right.
So
And I would say be open to receiving those calls as well.
Yeah.
Just like if you're having to make that call, be open to listening to that other call and making that counter proposal, and make as Sam says, make a solid counter proposal that you could live with. At least you've got a starting point.
That's right.
Yeah, Bill, if I could jump in for 1 second, I agree. It's going to be a two-way street. We're already seeing it with our customers, and we're certainly, I'm sure, on the supply chain side. But somebody mentioned it, but I want to reiterate it: is it empathize with either your supplier or your customer.
Mm-hmm.
So put your as opposed to your problems, figure out what they're thinking, what they're saying, what they're doing, how they're feeling, that kind of stuff. And when you can put it in that context, now you're a team member, and they will be more receptive to working it out. I mean, people work with people they trust, and they buy from people they like, they buy from people they trust. So if you can empathize not only with your clients or your prospects, but also your suppliers, I mean, this is different from 2009 because we were just thrown into the deep end in 2009. I mean, the bank, the companies didn't know what to do. Here, we're all sort of empathizing together, right? Because it's nothing that anybody did to create the problem, per se. It's a health problem. It's a crisis we're trying to avoid. It's not a crisis essentially we're totally into yet from a health perspective. And so I said, empathize, pivot your approach if it makes sense to empathize, whether it be how you pay or how you sell. So just my 2 cents on reevaluating market fit and empathizing with your suppliers and your customers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now we're going to
adversarial. You're both on the same side getting through the season, right? That's what you have to do.
you believe it or not, you all have a shared interest in seeing you not go under.
Right.
So now, which brings us to the next source of money, investors and capital. I'm going to start off with a question that's been asked a couple times, and one that was literally my first thing because I've been there. Friends, family, professional investment, angels, however you happen to raise capital. How often do you talk to them? How do you talk to them? When? How candid can you be? Do you ask for help? I mean, what are the bounds to dealing with this situation? Sam had a smile on his face, so I'll start with Sam again, and then we'll move over to Gene.
It is impossible to over communicate in a crisis. People assume the worst when they don't know things. That includes investors. More importantly, it is in every investor's best interest that you survive, and they are willing to mobilize their networks in order to help you survive. I'd include, as long as I'm convinced that an investor is on my side, right, I'd include one of my major investors in my crisis response team. So I believe communicate early, communicate often, and I think, frankly, the Stockdale paradigm is a good one, right? Which is be brutally honest and then give people a rational basis for seeing that you can emerge from this crisis, and I take that position.
Gene?
Yeah, no, I agree with Sam 100%. I'm actually really fortunate in this startup because I have a really good partner, and what we have done is we have over communicated to the investors. We have a briefing coming up, a disaster briefing, where the plan is to be as transparent as possible. And like I said in the beginning, to really have a financial disaster plan that basically models out what your business looks like under these circumstances as best that you can model that out. We actually went above and beyond. My partner called every single one of our investors and had an individual conversation with them, looking for pointers, looking for guidance. I think exactly like Sam said, you need to pull these people in. The reason they're on your board is because, and investors is that They've been through this. They've been through these things before. They have a really unique perspective, and you've got to leverage them. You've got to leverage their expertise, and I would highly recommend that. I think the more you communicate, the more options you're going to have. And in this current time, you cannot have enough. You cannot have enough options to consider to be able to get through this.
Thanks, Gene. And I'm reading questions and looking at my list too. So, Mark, you've done some angel investing as well. What do you want to hear from the companies?
I think, just kind of echoing what these guys said, you want to hear the truth. You want to hear, really where things are, because there will come, you will come through this, and you want to be able to your reputation is on the line as well. And, you want to make sure that you're as honest as you can be. People understand what's going on. We've all talked about this problem that has been created. No one is blaming on any individual. It's not something that you have done. Investors recognize that, but they won't recognize if you're lying to them or if you're not telling them the truth about where your business is. So I would just echo what they said, which is honesty and communication is really the key. And I would also say, though, just for folks who are in the process of raising capital, things have changed. So, if you've gotten what you think are commitments from people or expectations of what your valuation is going to be, and you've been led to believe that this is happening, it may not be, and it probably is not. Things probably have changed. To Sam's point earlier about everything to negotiation, this is something that has changed in that negotiation. So expect that things have changed for them as well. Their risk tolerance, and their own assets may have dropped 30% in the last 3 weeks. So expect that the terms, conditions, valuations have changed. And it's not a fault of theirs. It's not a fault of yours. It's a reality of where we are.
And I just saw an article this morning. Private equity, VCs, angels have, the deal you may have turned down recently, and if you go back to them, that's what's going on right now, is not there anymore. So those terms are gone. So last question, I'm gonna shoot this one at Jenny. What do you think about keeping your personal finances separate from the business? I mean, commingling, using your own capital to support the business. I mean, what are the limits there?
So that's really difficult. In my when I started this company, I secured a big credit line with the bank against my own assets. And I started using the bank's money. This was like 2000. And then when the market crashed, and so my whole credit line, and I would go to the bank and say, hey, don't you think I should pay down this line? And they said, no, look at what you're making in the stock market compared to the interest you're paying us, just keep going. Until it started going the other direction. And when the market started going down and my assets were decreasing, the bank called the loan. And Sam, I wish I would have had you to talk to back at that time, because I didn't know you could renegotiate anything. The banks were in trouble and they were seizing assets for anybody who had liquidity. And so they essentially wiped me out personally from the assets that I had. So I'm a little gun shy about that. And I don't have any debt now. You could argue from a business perspective, you're not leveraging enough if you're not taking any debt on. But if you're over your skis in debt and you can't pay your terms, or some external threat like this happens, then you're in trouble. So I would be very cautious about attaching personal assets. But that said, being a small business, my whole life, I've never taken a penny of investment from anybody. I've never been able to secure any sort of bank credit line or anything without signing my own personally guaranteeing it. So if somebody's got a solution to that, love to hear about it. But I don't think it makes sense to bet the farm unless you're extremely confident that you're going to get out of this on the other side of it okay.
Yeah, realize it's your family that's along for this ride too. There are things that are far more important than your business. Don't lose sight of that. Your health, your well-being, your family, that comes first. It always comes first. A business, you can create a new one, you could start a new one, you could do whatever. You're not going to recreate your family. So go ahead.
Just, remember, even in a catastrophe like a forest fire, new little seedlings come up. So preserve yourself so that you can start that next business when the time is better.
Okay, with that, we're going to run on to sales. So this I'm going to throw right into John's lap to start with. The things are burning down around us to a certain extent. Everybody's got a mountain of problems. Do you stop selling? I mean, how do you go out there and make sales calls? I mean, what do you do? Because you've got revenue to keep going. I mean, from somebody that's faced customer side forever, what do you do?
So great, thanks. Great question, and sort of what I try to address in my one crucial thing. The short answer is you actually double down on selling, in my opinion. Because if you think of a sales pipeline, you have a whole bunch of deals up at the top and they funnel down and a few of them come out at the bottom. And so the amount of money, the amount of deals or opportunities you put in the top is going to be proportionally, hopefully, better at the bottom. That same bit of advice, now is the time to reevaluate your market fit, empathize with your prospects. If you understand what they're doing, feeling, saying, doing, you can probably put together potentially a pivot that will, it may be a little pivot. Like what I'm really impressed on some of the restaurants and some of the other, storefront folks, they're just going and getting vans and driving around the neighborhood selling their wares out of the back of the vans, right? They're selling pizzas and beers and stuff. So they're being very creative in a situation. But short answer to your question, you've got to continue to build that pipeline. Your sales cycle may elongate, but just keep building it and keep prospecting and keep, fundamental 101 sales. It should absolutely not stop.
Kathy, we get the all clear. The virus ramps down. We're starting. How long do you think, or what do you count on for getting back to normal from dealing with your customers and a revenue stream? You've lived through multiple of these. How long did it take to get back to where you were before it all hit?
It's a hard question to answer in this context because it varies. I think how to get back to normal and when is good. I can tell you what it depends on. It depends on how you've treated your customers, as John was saying, but it's a deep thing. It's not just looking at the funnel and triaging, right? It's actually getting close to customers, like the people who are driving around selling food. Like, this is an unprecedented time to really test your value proposition. And the stronger that your value proposition is, the easier it is going to come out the other side. And also, with respect to your reputation, we're using this as a time where we are convinced that we can prevail as a team and actually be one of the most competent standing, right? So there's going to be some people who are caught and go out of business, and how you manage yourself through the crisis is a testament to your integrity, your competence, and your values. So if you can bring these things together in this time when we're hunkering down, I think that will help you come out at the end of it. What you do now is, and you have to empower your people, and you have to empower yourself to do the right thing. And sometimes that means cutting back. But I really don't have a good answer. Sometimes the sheltering, we're going into an accelerator, it lasts till October. I don't know what our case is going to be looking like in October, but I do know that we're going to have an extraordinary experience in the 6 months that we have ahead with help from men and investors.
Sam?
Hey, Bill, there's one thing that you can count on, and that is that thanks to regulation, quarterly budgeting cycles are annual. And this crisis is occurring in this fiscal year, and it's going to have impacts next fiscal year. So I'm going to suggest that it'll take 18 months for things to return to normal, because we have budgetary impact. So if anywhere in your chain is our corporate entities, 18 months to really normalize and for things to feel normal again. So I would be doing my planning for 18 months of not normal. And as Gene may have said, I might plan on revenues being down 30 to 50% over my previously optimistic projections for at least, for that long, right? It could happen sooner. We could come into almost normalcy before that, but I would use 18 months as my outside planning horizon.
Okay.
And I'll add to that.
Go ahead.
And hold on, let me just add to what Sam said. So the 18 months is really important. So the investor conversations that we have had and kind of the feedback that we've gotten is we need to plan for 18 months of cash on hand. People are not going to be investing for 18 months, but I've actually heard that people will be deploying capital, but very, very selectively. So the plan is everybody's going to be looking at, do you have cash? Do you have the ability to survive for 18 months to turn this thing around? So that's a really important number when you're planning your financials.
Okay, Gene, we had a question just on a definition. Explain the metaphor, extend the runway.
So, I mean, so extending the runway basically means how do you refactor your entire business to extend the amount of time that you can actually operate, and I'm saying that very loosely. So number one, we talk about stopping all hiring. So if you take a look at what are the items that you have on your budgeting financial plans, you have hiring. You stop that immediately. You focus on your employees. That's number one. Number two, you figure out who are your non-essential employees and be able to ethically cut them as soon as possible. Number three, what do you have to minimize everybody who is existent salary? Cut it in half. By the way, we have internally to our startup, we've already taken all those measures. So how much do you have to minimize everybody's dollars? Do you have the ability to get any loans? Do you get the ability to get any grants? So basically what you're looking at is between additional dollars that you can bring in and dollars that you can cut and really make the cuts very deep. How long can you survive as a company, and also evaluating your own ability, kind of to what Jenny was saying before, evaluating your ability to live a life and take care of the personal needs that you have to take care of. It's very cut and dry when you really look at it. Can you survive for the period of time you need to survive before your business actually starts selling? For some people, that may be 6 months when they can start generating more revenue. For others, it may be 18 months till they start seeing a turnaround in their in their margins.
Okay, and I'm going to direct the next two at Jenny. I've got a couple good, very talented developers. How do you go to them and ask them to take a pay cut? I'm afraid of losing them.
I think that's a very difficult thing right now because developers are in high demand. And if they it depends on how invested they are in your business and what you're doing and the vision of the future. The risk is that the jobs are out there and the big companies will snap them up, the in-house places. And that may be a safer place for them at this time. So get creative. Think, is there a way you can offer them some sort of equity? But at the end of the day, you might lose them for now, but maybe not forever. If it's safer for them to go get a job with a big company, maybe that's what you need to think about, and either ask them back sometime in the future. Is there a way you can, but just be careful that you're not just delaying the inevitable, because it's not fair to that employee either. So it's a very difficult thing. But when your product is people, or your product depends on having those high quality resources, that's the most difficult set of decisions that you have to make.
I know in the 2008 crisis this happened, so I'm gonna ask the question: what happens to hourly rates for anybody billing by the hour?
You want me to take that one, Bill? Because I
Go right ahead.
I lived through that. So well, it was really it was the dot-bomb crisis, right? So 2000, 2001, 2002, I actually had been running a small organization. I was part of the management team here in Cleveland. We had grown up, to like 15 or 20 people, and we went through exactly this. And so to Jenny's point, it's a tough conversation, particularly in people that haven't been through this. So I had a team of 10 developers that were less than 30 years old, thought they were worth $125 an hour in the marketplace. And unfortunately, what they were doing from a result of the economy and the technology, their, let's say, value was more like $85 an hour in the marketplace. That was a really hard conversation to have with them. It's probably one of those parental conversations you need to have, like when you're talking to your kids, because they didn't believe me. And a lot of them tried to go out on their own and be freelance. And what they found was they got gigs, but if the subcontractor didn't get paid, they didn't get paid. So there's going to be, I think it's the time where you have to have an open conversation, maybe apply some of these history lessons we have, but at the same time, people are going to think things that just aren't true anymore. And I like Gene's thing. Well, would you put that sign back up, Gene? The new normal is normal is now the unnormal is the new normal. Yeah, I mean, the new normal. What we learned in 2008 was this. What we do today, we started doing in 2008, and we just continue to go. So I think when we come out of this, and the unnormal that we're in now is going to become the new normal. I don't think, things will come back to some sort of normalcy, but it's going to be totally different, just like it was in 08, 11, 87, whatever.
Good, Sam.
Hey, Bill, I wanted to make sure people thought about this. Is especially true with developers, but frankly, it's true with almost anybody in the business. There's this term called situated knowledge, right? The intrinsic understanding of the business and then our subject matter expertise. I'm a developer. I get the way we've implemented the business and logic, and I understand the business. And that kind of knowledge is very valuable to the business. It's hard to quantify. And when you let somebody go, you're shipping that knowledge outside the business. So it's the reason to maintain a relationship. You can have a candid conversation, say, because you have a family and children, I understand it makes sense. I'd like to try and help you find a full-paying job at a large enterprise for right now. And I hope you'll be able to come back at some point, keep the relationship, or say to them, we'd like to reduce your comp, but we'd like to give you equity. Frankly, that's another hook, right? But the reason to, even if eventually you separate paths temporarily, that kind of situated knowledge is very hard to rebuild, and it's a reason to try and keep those employees in the orbit, at least, even if you can't keep them fully employed.
Yeah.
And think about the 1099 contract with them for part-time, right? They may be able to develop, can cobble together a lot of work.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
Just one comment on your initial question, what happens to hourly workers, and kind of John's comment. Even if your hourly workers may go somewhere else and maintain that same dollars, it doesn't mean they're going to get that many hours. So they might be able to maintain the 125 that he talked about, but their employers, that their new employers may be willing to pay them 125, but they're only going to pay them 5 hours a day. So if you can consistently tell them, look, I can guarantee you're going to get 40 hours or whatever it might be, but your rate is going to be a little bit lower to get us through this, that's a conversation you can have as well. Your hourly rate may be lower, but you're going to get paid more as my employee than you are going to go somewhere else making more, but they're not going to give you the hours because they don't have the cash either.
Hey, this is also the
numbers lower.
This is also the time to document institutional knowledge, by the way, right? Document your processes and try and record that, because if you do have to separate people from the organization, as best you can, have those procedures documented so you don't lose everything.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump right over to the next topic because this leads right into it about employees. How do you communicate with your team? Anyone?
No different.
I think individually first, mainly to understand where they stand, with a commitment to come back and after doing some very hard modeling on your runway, go back and have a frank conversation about prospects and the length of time that you think you've got to muddle through. But eventually it's an all hands meeting, right? And so I think it's iterative, and I think it's compassionate, and it's coming to grips with what the reality is, and everyone is going through it. Every single company is going through it right now. So they're not alone, you're not alone.
Yeah, but one important point I just want to iterate that Kathy said is that until you model out what you need to do to survive your business, you can't really have that conversation. Unless you're just going to say, look, we're going through some unprecedented times and we have to think about it. That's really, it's a really like a half-cocked answer. So I think you as the leadership need to figure out what you need, how you're going to handle it, how you're going to take, whatever cuts you're going to need to make, figure that out before you have that conversation. Then after that, you can really have additional discussions. So I would say that would, that would predicate having a conversation with your team.
Yeah, I'd agree with Gene. The one thing I learned in 2011 and 12 was that the law of unintended consequences came into play, and we thought we were doing the right thing, and some employees it was the right thing, and other employees it was terrible. So I would be, again, it goes back to sort of the theme that we've been having is, understand your employees' needs, understand where they are, because like I said, I was amazed we put a package together where we kept people around, and in some cases that was a really bad thing because the morale tanked and it just took the rest of the organization down. It would have been better just to cut those folks, let them go and pay them, So like I said, my only advice is always be aware of the unintended consequences in something like this, because you might be trying to do the right thing and it might just totally backfire on you.
Quick editorial comment. We have room for more questions if you want to go ahead and keep asking, because we've got about 13 minutes left here. I'm going to try to hit a couple other topics. So hiding is out of the question, right?
What's the hide?
Hiding?
Well, hiding from your employees, hiding from investors.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
Bill, you have to communicate often, and crisis leadership is different. It is not providing all the answers because nobody has them, right? Crisis leadership is providing information and then structuring action so that people understand that they are working towards a rational path to get out of this. It's being brutally honest and saying we're opting to sever these people, frankly, so they can have certainty as opposed to uncertainty for the next 2 months. And in a very interesting study that just came out of Harvard Business School, if you create a crisis team and they deliberate on what they're doing, say once a week, they go through that OODA loop, some very innovative companies gave all of their employees the opportunity to observe those deliberations, and those companies both did better and had higher morale. So the antithesis of secrecy, total transparency, and saying, here's the crisis team we've assembled. You are welcome to participate or watch the deliberations, right? You can give input. This is the core team. So transparency and very frequent. I mean, I have scars on my back from the first crisis for trying to wait to communicate till I had answers. And what I learned is people don't think you have all the answers. So communicate early, right? Provide the information you have and then structure the action. That's crisis leadership.
That's good points.
If they don't hear from you, they assume the worst.
Right,
That's
and
right.
and you'll lose the good people. The ones that you don't want to lose will probably stay. So, you know, if they don't hear from you, they're assuming the worst and they're going out and looking at options.
Well,
Exactly.
and they're going to add, they're given the opportunity, they may come up with really creative ideas that you hadn't even thought about, whether it be a pivot, like the guy down the Masthead Brewing down in Cleveland, right? They're driving around and delivering beer out of the back of their truck because we can't go and drink their beer. Or there's a guy in Cincinnati doing the same thing, and they're probably making more money doing that than they were, you know. So your employees, I think the collective wisdom of your team, harvest that up, and you may come up with some great pivots. You may come up with some better market fit ideas. You know what's funny about all this, Bill, is all this stuff we're talking about is stuff we should be doing anyway. It's just this crisis is bringing it to the top of our head. So all these ideas are really just really good basic management ideas, and you know, so in some aspect, it's making us think because we have to, as opposed to becoming lazy. So that I mean, you guys are much more entrepreneurs, but I'm seeing some really cool, like, wow, we should have been doing this anyway. This is the way we should be running our business. This, you know, good cash flow, good market fit, all these things we try to teach through the mentoring program.
So
Yeah, let me shift.
so wait a second. So day zero, like Jeff Bezos says about Amazon, treat every day like it's the first day of your company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna run to next.
Okay, hold on.
Stop.
Let me
Fine.
let me introduce one other thing. I think this is. Can I just jump in real quick?
No, go ahead.
Before we run out of time. So I'm guessing most of the audience are entrepreneurs. I think this is the time to really be thinking outside of the box. Don't just take a look at how you can internally survive this by cutting your cash and, you know, cutting headcount. I think you also have to look at your partnerships. Who are the potential partners? Even some that were your competitors, but who can you turn into at this time? Who can you turn that are potential partners, ones that are better equipped to weather this, that have cash that you can provide a service for, that you can closer partner with, that will help you survive this thing. You can't just look internally. I think I've been hearing the "we're all in this together" comment way one too many times, and it's not just High School Musical. It's, you know, really think about who can you go to, who are the people in your ecosystem that can potentially invest in you at this time, or partner, or reuse your services to engage their customers. What can you do? We're actually doing exactly the same thing, and we've had some positive comments that we're probably going to put into play here in the next couple of weeks. So I would highly encourage everybody to really think outside the box. Who can they partner with? Who can they go to help support their business in this time in any way?
Okay, I've got one issue I want to bring up because it's affecting everybody on the call, and I know it, and I lived it. It's mental health. And somebody else had a couple vendor questions. I'll try to get those in. In the past crisis, there's a tendency to want to curl up in a ball. Thanks, Gene's got it. Gene's got the bottle of alcohol. That's actually one of the bullets. Depression, rampant. Suicide, rampant. I have statistics that show that even in good times, the incidence of bipolar disorder, depression, other mental illnesses for entrepreneurs is several times higher than the regular population. This type of event will impact your relationships with your spouses, your partners, your family, your coworkers. You can't let it take you down. You need a counterbalance. We've all been through things coming through this. Gene, I know, for one, had physical impacts. How do you deal with it differently than the first time, Gene?
So I had a massive heart attack last year, and I think you have to look at, the only way you're going to be able to do this is you have to look at the bigger picture. You can't just think about this may end and this will be the end. You have to think about there's not a silver bullet for this. I'm not going to have an exact answer. It's basically you have to think about what you have. You have to think about that you're going to come out of this and you're going to be wiser. You're going to learn how to deal with these situations, and there will be a silver lining to this, and you have to figure out who you can lean on. Right now is the time to find friends, to find coworkers, to find people that you can get online with and just have a conversation. And I think you have to say, look, I am struggling right now. Can you give me some perspective? It is okay to ask for perspective. I do that with my wife. I do that with my 17-year-old daughter, which I get a really interesting perspective sometimes. But you know what? It helps. It really helps me think about things. And I think everybody should be doing that right now. If anybody needs someone to talk to, bounce ideas around, shoot me an email. Happy to get on a FaceTime call or just exchange emails, cut some jokes, and figure out how to best move on from this.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, look, I think finding a person who you are in a psychological safe zone with, to be totally candid with, can be restorative. Important at times like these, not necessarily common in America, maybe not common for men, but it is, someone, by the way, who will speak the truth to you, but compassionately, right? And is a good reference point, I think, can be incredibly restorative. But it's got to be a psychological safe zone. If it is a board member, it's got to be a board member who has your back and probably is not a majority investor, right? If it's not, if it's someone else in your sphere, I think that can be incredibly helpful. And for yourself and for your entire team, I think enforce periodic restorative acts, right? On some period, on Friday, at a given time, this is the time for everybody to stop working. You're all at home doing whatever, right? This is the time to engage in whatever you do: meditation, prayer, exercise, whatever that thing is you do. We're now you're on the payroll for the next hour, and your job is to restore yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I think also to recognize the situation our employees are in, where all of a sudden they're working from home. They may have children at home that they're trying to homeschool and work at the same time, so their lives are stressful. Just recognizing all that and really just talking about it. You're not solving the problems, but there's therapeutic value in just talking and letting people have this moment where they can complain and whine and laugh. I think laughter is really important. We don't know where we're going, but trying to take care of each other is really important, and communicating. And the other thing I would say, for maybe this is a generational thing, when I grew up, you didn't ask for help. And as business owners, we think we're supposed to have all the answers. And even if it's something really fundamental, like you don't really understand your finances, a lot of the things we talked about here about the runway and cash and all that, I know a lot of business owners that have been in business for a long time that really don't understand an income statement. So don't be afraid to go get help and ask somebody. Maybe you just send all your stuff to the accountant, and maybe you should know all this stuff, but don't be afraid to have these conversations. Find a mentor. There are people out there, and people love helping each other. So get over, and that's what I said.
Shaking our heads.
I felt so alone the first time because I was so afraid to ask for help or tell anybody that I was struggling. So.
Yeah, entrepreneurism is not a solo endeavor. No one is Superwoman or Superman. Especially in the Midwest, we carry a big chip on our shoulders about we can do it all ourselves. It is not healthy, nor is it a road to success. Ask an expert at jumpstartinc.org is if you have additional questions that we didn't get to today, we'll do our best to get you those answers as well. We have them logged. If you want to apply for assistance from Jumpstart, look at what we've got online. There's a resource guide. You could go to jumpstartinc.org. And last but not least, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, all the people behind the camera out there that are making this work. And last but not least, I want to thank all you attendees. We're with you. We've been there. We want to help. We've got a lot of empathy for what you're going through, and don't be afraid to reach out. And again, we'll all get through this. Thank you.